far back I want to go, but like
to the interesting parts only.
Interesting part, my whole 20s were interesting.
Right. Last week we talked a little bit about who to work with, how to get along, and sort of how important that is, right? It's like that you sort of mesh well with your clients, because in the end, you're not just going to work with anybody. Is that, kind of the case? Or not only that, but a client kind of isn't just going to work with you just because. Like, they kind of have to get along.
Everyone has to mesh well, and there's stories for days where, I don't even remember if I told the story last time, but it's very good friends of mine who they were trying and wanted a realtor. And the very first realtor, they saw his property, they called the broker that we want to see this. They sent somebody out, terrible experience. The guy didn't do anything. Like, I'll let them get into it if we ever have them on.
Sure.
The second they ended the showing, they called that broker back, or that team, or whomever, was like, that guy was terrible. So I never want to see him again. I never want to work with him again, and you need to do something about him.
Right.
So if you want me to work with you, send somebody else next time.
Yeah.
And it was like, it's a funny story because they ended up sending someone with completely different energy, and I forget what her name was, and it was like they had such a great experience with her that also kind of segueing into something else a little bit different too, but like they loved her. So whenever I went to go buy my first house, they referred me to her. I called her and got the opposite experience that they got, because she like answered my phone call and that's all. Like she wanted nothing to do with me. I'm like, well, that's interesting how that worked out.
Personalities definitely are, they could be different energies and different, the way that people problem solve. Certain people problem solve, inside out, backwards in, or,
Yeah, it was just weird just because how, like, they got a great experience, great energy from her when they bought, but then whenever I called, like, I don't know, it just didn't seem like she had the time of day for
is
me.
that something that kind of sticks in the back of your mind?
It does.
When you're meeting someone, sort of being conscious of...
No, it's funny, it does, because I think about whenever, as a realtor I am today, I had no idea it was going to be one back then, so I think about my experience as a first-time home buyer whom I had to speak with.
And
And then when I finally met my realtor, my experiences with him, because he helped me buy my house and sell my house.
Right.
Funny story, helped sell my house twice, because I kind of canceled on him on this first time, so I felt bad for the guy. But
you didn't know it was a problem back then. Now you realize, like, oh, that's
I was like, I felt bad. I even called him when I got into real estate, and I was like, man, I'm sorry. Like, and now I know what that was been through. He's like, dude, you're still to this day one of my better clients.
Yeah.
Because like you've been through the whole.
I did the exact same thing. It's kind of funny that I talked to the realtor that helped me buy my house and apologized for being such a jerk. But I didn't feel like I was being a jerk. I felt like I knew better. But that was, I was like, oh, I could steal the ship, and he was great. He gave me enough leeway. But then you're right. I got into real estate, dealt with people in that regard, and then saw him not too long after, and said, hey, I'm real sorry about that. He's like, what are you talking about? So it helped me to know that I wasn't the worst of his clients.
Yeah.
So
and you come to realize that too, like as you get through more and more into the business, you deal with somebody completely different every single time.
Yeah.
Some are great, some aren't. It is what it is. It's the name of the game.
And you talked about your life before the business. So. What did you do before? What did you do beforehand? Where are you coming from? We know what you're doing now.
Yeah. So I did. So it kind of like backstory. Like I don't know how they're not. So like I graduated high school. I worked in a warehouse for 4 years.
Okay.
I realized that's not where I wanted to go. So I was going to join the military. I went to take the test to join the military, the Navy. And funny story, like I ran into an old friend from high school that day. Afterwards, he was like, "No, man. Don't do that. Let's go to college together. Go to WVU, West Virginia University."
Okay.
Yeah, so I was like, all right, sure, why not? I guess I always wonder what if, but I did. I went to West Virginia University. He flunked out the first year.
Okay.
Because he partied too hard. Cause I don't know if you know, West Virginia University may still be the number one party school.
From what we hear.
Right. And anyway, he flunked out, couldn't handle it. I stayed in, and then I got a degree in geology. So it was a fantastic curriculum. I loved every second of it, hiking, camping, whatever.
And what got you into geology? I mean, was that like...
Oh, man.
Always in the forefront?
Did it stumbled into it. Just the same thing, everything else in life. Stumbled into real estate, stumbled into everything else. I originally wanted to do music, but I don't know how to read sheet music, and I didn't want to be a teacher at the time. And then I got into like psychology, sociology, eventually got into
This is a pretty big
resume. I still to today, I'm just like... questioning my career path, but I'm just kidding.
Sure.
But anyway, eventually I had a friend of mine I worked with at the restaurant. He was in geology. He's like, talk to Dr. Joe. He was my professor. Go talk to him. I sat down with him one day, and he's like, yeah, if you like hiking, camping, caving, everything outdoors, I'm like, I'm sold.
Yeah,
he's like, yeah, for your capstone, in order to graduate, you go on a 5-week course in Montana, Wisconsin, and South Dakota, where you just go hiking and you map out mountains. And I'm like, sold.
That's so much more interesting. When you said geology, you just think of one thing, and you
rocks.
just described like...
Oh, it's much more than just looking at rocks. Like that was honestly a big portion of what I did,
right.
But we got to do a lot of cool stuff. So anyway, I graduated, found my new love for traveling, so I was like, well, I want to get out of here. Let's go somewhere warm. So I moved down to Florida, ended up getting a job with the health department, working for the environmental end, working with like soil sampling, water tables, and everything like that. Great benefits. Pay wasn't that great, but it was a kind of a dead-end job, but I got a lot of knowledge out of it. But I knew I didn't want to be there, and I just had to get out of it. So, which led me to my next job, which actually led me to here in Frederick.
Okay.
So I got a job at Seismic Surveys to become a vibration specialist, where what we do what they do is we monitor vibrations from major construction sites like pile driving, demolition, anything that's going to cause heavy vibrations that could potentially cause settlement on surrounding buildings. So what I did was I surveyed the houses before, during, and after the projects to look for sediment cracks, any sort of defects, and just monitor them. And then we have our seismographs that we set up to monitor the vibrations to make sure that there's no defects occurring, during or after the project, which actually helps me out to today, because I still am able to go into houses and look at that, because everyone freaks out about the smallest little crack in the foundation.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was going to ask. It sounds like a very, sounds like a well-rounded, like when you're going through, I can imagine like what kind of lens you're seeing these things through. Like what types of things did you sort of pick up? Not only technical knowledge, like seeing and visual and all that, but that sort of, inner ideology, the inner philosophy that you sort of built along the way. And when you have like a long resume, like you say, I did this, I music, and obviously there's some creative energies in there and all those things. So when you're looking at and you're dealing with your clients, you're sort of bringing all that, right? And you're sort of...
That's one of the first things I tell. It was that job eventually became miserable for me. It was just a lot. But I'm glad I did it, because I have knowledge, because whenever I go into my appointments, I let everyone know, like in a previous life, I was essentially a building inspector. I have an eye. The first thing I always do is look. I always try to look for any sort of defects. I'm looking at the ceiling. I'm looking for drywall cracks. When we get down to the basement, I try to look at the foundation. Is there specific bowing? Is there something that we're supposed to be looking out for that could potentially lead to something else? I'll let it be known that I'm not a licensed inspector. I'm not an engineer. I'm not somebody who specializes in that anymore. But I have a knowledge and I have an eye for it. And that's something, whenever we have a home inspector come in or somebody else,
right?
We can inform them.
Yeah. That's a lot of stuff, and it's good to sort of have that, right? To sort of have that background knowledge, and and again, it's a wide array of these things, and then to be able to look at it with a completely unique lens, and kind of when you present those ideas to people. Do you kind of find that certain people you get along with better, certain problem solvers you get along with better? Like, is there a certain personality type that you felt that you've had to work on a little bit more to sort of listen and understand the way that they solve their problems?
Yeah, everyone's a little different. I'm sure you've experienced the same thing. Like, some people, whenever I tell them that, it's just like, okay, yeah, sure, and then that's the last we ever talk about it. It's just everyone you just have to kind of just be mindful of the body, just the body movements, how everyone reacts to what you're saying,
right?
And just kind of
understand when they're the difference between venting to complain or looking for a solution. And I know for me, I'm working on my small talk, right? I'm very much to the point, very much business oriented, very much. We've got a problem. I'm already coming up with trying to come up with solutions that are going to be centered around what's going to make the most sense logically, what's going to have the least financial impact, what's going to the risk reward type deal.
So your background, right? That's what kind of led you to that mindset, because you have an interesting background too. I know we've talked about that many times.
So my background, Wall Street, I was up there 16 years. buying, selling, dealing with buyer psychology, obviously analyzing markets, supply and demand, and looking at things in that way, and weighing risk and reward, following trends, dealing with the negotiation side, knowing when we have leverage, when we don't, and sort of protecting that.
That's interesting. It's interesting how that could easily fall into place, like help you out with what we're doing today.
Oh, absolutely. And, I say it in a joking way, but it's like, we go out and see countertops and shaker-style cabinets, and those are all fun. But once we get to the negotiation and we're talking about money, then I get excited. It's like, constantly, talking to clients and like, okay, here's what we're going to, here's what we have. Here's, path A, B, and C, what we can do. And it's always funny. Some people are having, that's their mode. Yes, absolutely. They're all for it. And other people, they, as soon as you start talking about negotiation, their risk aversion is, we just want to, win the house and we'll do whatever. And feeling them out and like, are you guys having fun? This is so much,
And that's what I was going to ask you. Like, how are you getting with everyone kind of reacting to that? Because you mentioned figuring out how you should talk to certain people a certain way. Because some people are like, oh, easy, slow down there, cowboy. Right. Like, let's let's not go that far just yet.
And I definitely have had to feel that out, and that was kind of the role that I used to take when I was dealing, with my realtors before I was in the business. Coming up with my ideas. So I learned a lot from them in how they sort of presented me the options, and that's the most important thing. Where it's my risk aversion is risk tolerance is different from yours, different from anybody's. So you have to make sure that you're catering to that. Some people don't want to take any risks. Some people are willing to risk it all to get a certain deal, and if it doesn't go through, then they're okay going on to the next property. The most important thing to do is to lay out every possible scenario of what can happen. That way, the buyers, or sellers, right, the clients know what the consequences are, what their strategies can be, and what they're risking, and what the reward is, so that they can weigh them themselves. That's the most important.
Yeah, that's what we do. We always have to lay out all of our options, then have them make a great decision, and then just advise them along the way. Just like you said, you have all the options available. This is the outcome of each individual one,
and guiding.
And this is the stress level for each individual one.
The stress levels are great. Yes.
Yeah. Did we just die?
No. We're rolling.
Bye.
That's okay.
That was a good one.
I think that's a good one. I'm going to put it to be continued.
Yeah. Back. We're live. So where we left off, we were talking about Biaggio, his previous life, what he did before he got into real estate, and how you went over risk assessments, right? You laid out like different options for your people. Yeah. They may have different stress levels and what option might work best for their scenario. We
were talking about backgrounds and how what you bring from your experience, your story, who it is about you, and how you approach things, and that's sort of my way. And like I was saying, I have to work on my small talk and and all that, and but yeah, that's kind of the way I see it from that standpoint. And we were talking about how it's being mindful of that risk tolerance for different people, and some people want to go things a certain way. Everybody wants to get to that goal line, but everybody thinks wants to get there in a different way, and you have to make sure that they're comfortable with it.
Yeah.
So you have to lay everything out, explain those consequences, and get out there. And I think a lot of the fun for me is meeting new people, hearing things from a different perspective, seeing the process from a different point of view, because you don't know what people's backgrounds are or what their stories are, and that's what makes it so interesting, right? Getting to learn more about people and different.
Yeah, and it makes it interesting for us, like what you were saying, because then it gives us an opportunity to, again, look at something in a different perspective, or problem solvers, because sometimes we are problem solvers, because you have a very unique situation, and then I need to help you get out of it. And if it's something I haven't dealt with before, I guarantee you I'm sure as heck find a way to figure it out.
Right.
Which is very great with what we do, because we're on such a great team with all the great tools. So we can utilize everything we can.
You have so much background. You have so many different stories per person, so many different ways of looking at things, but at the same time being able to present it in a helpful way. You could be saying the same thing in two different ways, and those are two different outcomes that you can get. So you have to know, or you have to get a sense for the clients that you're working with and how to present those things. That way you're the most helpful.
Yeah.
And that's kind of part of, the fun of what we do, like I said, and that's kind of part of the mission of what we're trying to do going forward, right?
Yeah.
Getting out, trying to meet more people and hear more stories. So, if we have some people out there that want to share their stories.
Yeah, we'd love to hear it. If you have any sort of unique story just on how you got to where you are today, whether you're a homeowner, business owner, just anybody in general, we would love to hear it because, again, that's what we're here for. We want it, like, everyone's unique, everyone's a little different in their own way. And, again, if you're a business owner, what got you there? How did you get there? Again, or if you have a very unique situation, like, what happened whenever you tried selling your house, or how relocating or buying a house, or anything just in general. It doesn't have to be real estate related, because again, we would love to hear these stories.
That's it. We collect stories, basically.
Storytellers, it's great, and we love what we do, and meeting as much people as possible.
Yeah. So if there's anybody out there that would like to share their story, would like to talk about their buying and selling process, talk about the area that you're from, or maybe a good or bad story about a realtor that you dealt with, or just anything, comments.
Drop in our
DMs,
everything,
email, phone call,
simple text message. Sometimes we'll do. Yeah, let us know.
And that's it. Production cut.
And
everything's
cut.